Hello, if you're watching this video, you're probably looking for more detailed help when it comes to using your hand gestures inside of public speaking. And that's kind of what this video has been created for. There's been a lot of confusion over hand gestures in general, and it's a topic that doesn't really get explored much. So inside this video, I chose to dissect what hand gestures really should look like and what they shouldn't look like in further detail. So the first thing that I want to point out is that I have a rule when it comes to hand gestures, and it's pretty simple. It's just that less is more. And what I mean by that is that most people have a tendency to use their hands much more than is necessary or expected or even helpful towards their speech or purpose. And of course, I'm no exception to this. As a result, when I say less is more, what I mean is that you can get your message across as effectively and as, let's say, proficiently when it comes to the communication aspect with less hand gestures than more. Using your hands more doesn't necessarily equate with using them more effectively. And so something that I like to draw out when I'm teaching students or just in general when it comes to hand gestures is kind of like this number line, right? So there's negative, neutral, and positive. And most people start negative when it comes to hand gestures. What this means is that your hand gestures distract or take away from your message. For example, if you're giving a speech and you're fidgeting with your fingers, let's say, people are going to be much less focused on what you're saying. Let's say you're talking about technology or something, than what your hands are doing. They're going to focus on, oh, look at his fingers playing with each other. What are they doing? And they're going to be focused on how you're moving, how you're fidgeting, and it'll take away from the actual speech itself because they will no longer be looking at your slides. They'll no longer be listening to what you're actually saying. Instead, they're just going to be looking at where your hands are fidgeting. So that falls under negative. And I think that getting from negative here to neutral is actually the hardest part because you basically have to unlearn what you've been learning for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, right? If you've been someone that plays with his hands when he speaks, fidgets, maybe sways your body when you speak for the past 10 years, you have to unlearn all of that to not be distracting anymore. And so I think the hardest part is really getting to where you can just give speeches naturally relaxed with your arms by your side, not like a soldier, but not like flailing everywhere like an octopus or something. And so this getting from negative to neutral is the hardest part because you have to get rid of all these little things you've built up over the years. I've seen people that, again, like fiddle their thumbs, play with their pockets, tug on their t-shirt, all of that, it needs to go away for you to get from negative to neutral. And once you can get to neutral, and this basically means that your hand gestures aren't hurting you, but they're not helping you either, it's much easier to get to positive than it is to make the jump from negative to neutral. And so neutral, what does that look like? It basically just looks like, a normal conversational type of stance where you're not, as straight as a soldier, but you're also not flailing your arms everywhere, you're not distracting. You're kind of just standing normally, confident, composed, but not too rigid and not unnaturally, like straight. And you just don't look too tense, if that makes sense. Basically just natural pose. And then getting to positive. What does positive mean? It basically means that your hand gestures enhance your message. So that means that you're using your hands appropriately in ways that boost what you're saying. It aligns with the words you're saying, the sentences, the phrases. Your gestures are being used to basically enhance and, support the messages that you're saying. Getting across the communication, even if they're not listening to you, they'll know what you're saying through your hands. And I think that everybody's different when it comes to enhancing, your gestures. Like, for example, I might use gestures that help myself when I speak, but those gestures might look weird on someone else because it's all about finding what's natural to you, what comes naturally, because if it comes naturally to you as a gesture, it'll look natural as well. But I think that there are a couple gestures that I'm just going to go over at the end of this video right now that can be used inside of speeches, and I really don't want you to memorize gestures, but I just want to throw these out as examples of what gestures, positive gestures, could look like. So, a couple of my most popular gestures that I personally like the most is when I'm describing something, let's say, that has a volume or size. I'll use my gestures to say, hey, that's a really large water bottle, right? Or it affects a really large amount of people. Boom. I'm using my hands to make my point that it's big, that it's large, that it's, long, whatever. It's a calculation or a measurement of size. You can do the other way. On the flip side, you could be like, yeah, a really small percentage of people right now are wearing masks, for example. That's where I could use, like my hand gesture to really enhance what I'm saying, my message, that, a really small amount of people. Now, another couple like uncommon ones that you might not see much, but I like to use is stuff like increasing. For example, the number of coronavirus cases, unfortunately, inside of Texas are increasing right now. There, I use my hands to accentuate my point, essentially. And you can do the same with decreasing. And then another really one that I like to use that I think really enhances my message is when I'm comparing two objects or two people. I could say something like, Sally is taller than like Martha. Or, my water bottle is cooler than my friend's. You can compare two things. You can compare two countries. Saudi Arabia has more oil than the United States. Either way, those gestures are pretty common. So using size, using increasing, comparing two things. And last of all, whenever I'm like, me personally, as you can see, I'm using that gesture. When I'm referring to myself, I like to point inwards to myself. And when I'm including the audience in my message, I'll just, I'll be like, we need to take a stand, all of us. And another, really key tip that goes along with those gestures is you always want to keep your palms open when you're giving hand gestures, because you just come off as more honest and just more open in general versus, obviously you don't want to have fists, but even palms down it's just really, weird, It just doesn't look as good as having your palms open. So hopefully this video covered a little bit more and taught you a little bit more about using hand gestures inside of speeches, and I hope that you will use them sometime soon and really take this into consideration, and especially try to stay on either the neutral or positive side of hand gestures. And once again, don't memorize any of the gestures I made inside of this video. They're just examples to show you what good hand gestures might look like. Thank you for watching.